This is Gray Malin, and you are listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and we're in for a real treat today. Here with me is internationally renowned fine art photographer and New York Times bestselling author, Gray Malin. Gray and I first met about 10 years ago on a photo shoot in Bhutan, but more on that later. His photography has an extraordinary ability to transport viewers to breathtaking destinations around the world in fun and unexpected ways. While he's based in Los Angeles, he can typically be found hanging out of doorless helicopters to capture the most stunning aerial shots, crafting partnerships with world-renowned brands like Disney, Google, and Don Julio, and checking in on his breathtaking short-term rental property, the Gray Malin Getaway House in Montecito, California. He just published his newest book, Dogs, where he captures the world's chicest canines in a delightfully playful series. Gray, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and to have a wonderful conversation.
It's so fun to reconnect, and I know I covered a lot in that introduction, but tell us, how did you first get started in photography?
So I got started in photography in high school. I studied black and white film photography and learned, um, you know, all of the traditional aspects of what it was like to take a photograph with a manual camera. And I had just an instant obsession with watching my images develop in the darkroom and the trays and perfecting sort of the the lighting and the truly composition of sort of this, I'd say, the 101 of photography, which really comes down to shapes and sort of patterns and repetitions. And there's something called the rule of thirds. But my mother has a interior design background, and my father is in real estate. So when I was growing up, I had just a really keen sense of sort of the home space and the way artwork made me feel in our house. And so from a young age, I was sort of trained to think about kind of, artwork or photography and how it felt in a home.
Mm.
And my parents moved from New York City to Dallas, which is where I grew up. And he invested in a property out in West Texas near a town named Marfa. And
Mm.
Marfa, has long time been a incredible sort of, I'd say, like, retreat for artists. And Donald Judd really created something revolutionary there way back when, I think in like the 60s. But when I was starting out, there was a, sort of a cool new, I almost want to say like New York cool meets like cowboy chic energy coming to Marfa. And they opened a freestanding Prada store art installation. And, I went out there I remember being out there when I was like 13, 14, 15 years old. But in high school, when I had my camera, I mean, I really took some of my very first images that helped launch my career in
Mm.
Marfa of the Prada Marfa art installation, utilizing locals from the township, such as cowboys and mules and horses, and really creating work that was sort of marrying this beautiful West Texas landscape with like this almost surreal Prada store with a kind of fun, whimsical nod of cowboys and horses. And all of that, those sort of concepts really gave birth to like, oh wow, like people really like these images. I think they look really great in people's homes. So I got my start really thanks to my parents and thanks to sort of thinking about photography more as home decor rather than just, this traditional kind of almost mathematical equation of aperture, shutter speed, rule of thirds, composition. There's so many factors in that space.
Wow. I love that story. And I want to go back to your mom and dad later when we talk about the Gray Malin getaway house, because to me, I'm hearing this in your DNA already. But there was so much there that you said that I want to just pick on a little bit more. The Prada Marfa images, I'm not just saying this because you and I are talking. I genuinely feel like those photos that you took are iconic. And I didn't realize that was so early in your career. Was that before you started selling at the Sunday market or after, or where did that fit in?
So that was at the same time as the Sunday market,
Mm,
and I had one photograph, black and white photograph that hung in my booth, and
mm,
every Sunday it would sell pretty much like hotcakes. Like I'd
mm.
sell 10 prints of that and like one print of maybe an image I took, in Paris or something. But it gave me the idea to go back to Marfa and
Mm,
to really work on a larger project there. And that's when I pulled in, thanks to my dad and his relationship out there, people from the township, like his friend Carl, who's a cowboy, came with his friend Malcolm, and Carl brought his mule. And suddenly I started to hang these images, in my booth that were more kind of really truly whimsical. And that's
yeah,
when I noticed, wow, like this is what people want. They want this fantasy. They want this kind of, you know, this destination, but with like a twist. And I remember someone came in and was like, this photo is so fabulous because every time someone walks into my house, they're going to ask me about this photograph. They're going to say, what
mm,
is this? And I just love that it sparks conversation.
mm,
And, I took that along with so many other comments from people like to heart and thought about, you know, wow, people want artwork that's not just inclusive, but it's conversational, it's relatable. So Prada Marfa really was the beginning for me. And it's thanks to the flea market. It's really helped me figure out kind of where to begin.
It's such a
And
good example too of listening to your customers because you saw that one photo selling and that made you think, "Maybe I need to go back there," and then you really saw and you were able to distill down what is it that they like about it, and from those conversations, really guiding the ethos of your brand. I love
yeah.
that, and I saw something about you starting to actually sell your photos in a 10 by 10 booth at a Sunday market. Is that right?
Yes, I am a true sort of American dream story where I started in my garage printing my work, not traditionally like through a gallery, really trying to figure out how to sell my work to the right kind of audience. And there was a really savvy, chic, fun, popular flea market in West Hollywood every Sunday that I used to kind of visit to find treasures for my home. And one day I thought, there aren't any photographers selling their work here. What if I set up a little booth and shared, my work here? And that is really where I was able to talk to people, discover what kind of artwork they were looking for to hang in their homes, really, really do the grassroots sort of approach. And in doing that, I was able to meet people who introduced me to the online world where I could eventually sell my work through the internet, through my own website, and connect to a much, much larger audience. But very proud to have started in a flea market.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And like you said, getting to talk to the consumers on a day to day basis and hear what they were looking for and almost democratize art is almost what you continue to do now with your direct to consumer website.
Have you ever walked into an art gallery and kind of been given the cold shoulder and sort of feel unwelcomed, or like maybe they don't see you as a serious consumer? That sort of was how I felt when I used to go into galleries, and I thought, why can't artwork be more inclusive? Why can't it be more, joyful and celebratory, and people should feel welcome to look at art? And what was so interesting is I didn't realize, but in launching a website, you really give, or I was able to give people that freedom to sit at home in their pajamas and browse and look at pieces of art in, a comfortable setting. And it really changed. I think it really, at that time when I was kind of launching my business, which was 15 years ago, that was really novel. Like, people were not buying artwork online, and
Yeah.
they certainly were more taught to buy artwork hanging in, traditional spaces like a gallery. So I really enjoyed sort of learning that from the customer. Like, the art world felt too exclusive, and then trying to think about creating something that was more inclusive. And I feel like that's kind of what my brand's all about. Like, I want everyone to feel like, when they see my work, that they're a part of the journey, or they can connect to it in some way, whether, they've been there, or if they can't afford the work, we have, puzzles that they could buy that are beloved as well. So it's been such a journey.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it's still quite novel. Yes, you can buy art online now more than you could then, but I still feel that way when I walk into galleries sometimes where I don't know if the thing that's hanging on the wall is going to be $500, $5,000, $500,000, and that kind of unapproachability or coldness when you walk in it, you're almost talking about how you brought hospitality to art, which I think also comes through so well through your imagery.
Yes. That's just so funny what you just said. I know. Like, is it 5,000 or 500,000?
Right.
Totally. And you're
Yeah.
almost, like, embarrassed if you find out, it's really expensive, and you're like, "Okay, thank you." But anyway,
Yeah. Thank you. I'll come back when I take out a mortgage for this. I'll be back soon. I wanna get to some other iconic imagery of yours, but before I do, what is the rule of thirds?
so the rule of thirds, it's basically, even now on an iPhone, there's, like, 9 quadrants in a photograph, basically. So if you ever turn on the grid on your iPhone, it's really about the balance of those 9 smaller squares or rectangles within the frame, and making sure your composition feels equal in those spaces, and or if it's like kind of something, where or something's partially in focus, there's something to balance it. So I always think of photography sometimes as geometry. Like, I feel like it's
Mm.
a lot of shapes within a frame that kind of, you know, remember the show on Netflix, like The Queen's Gambit, and she'd lay in
Yeah.
bed and like look at the ceiling and do chess. I sometimes feel like when I'm looking at a frame, like that's literally what my mind is doing
I
with
love it.
shapes, and it's hard to explain, but hopefully that helps kind of paint a picture.
It definitely does. And in addition to the Prada Marfa images that we were just talking about, I think some of the shots that you're best known for are really incredible aerial images. And I've seen some B-roll footage of you, Gray, where you are practically hanging out of a helicopter to capture these shots. I need to know if you've ever been afraid of heights and what that very first aerial shoot was like for you.
So after Proto Marfa took off, basically a young woman came into my booth and said, "Have you ever thought about selling your work online?" And I looked at her and just said, like, seriously, like the internet? I went to sell my work, Proto Marfa online, and it was so successful. I couldn't believe it. Like, I went from almost like, you know, not a starving artist, but like a real green sort of dipping my toe in the water type of artist, to like suddenly my work was being sent all up and down, the East Coast, the West Coast, Florida, Texas, Chicago. It was so much bigger than just this flea market in West Hollywood.
Mm.
And I was really almost very insecure about, like, people would say, what's your next project? And I was like, I don't know what my next project is. I'm just new to the internet, and I'm new to, Instagram was starting, and all of these sort of the iPhone put out like finally like a camera on the back of it. Photography was becoming kind of more popular, and I was sort of in the right place, at the right time in terms of wanting to grow this sort of what felt like a fantasy of being a professional fine art photographer. And I went to Las Vegas with a group of friends, sort of as a 22-year-old does from LA for the weekend. And we just randomly stayed at the Palazzo Hotel. I'd never been to Las Vegas. And we were like 30 stories above a bird's eye view down on the gigantic swimming pool. And I took a photo, like shoved my camera up against the glass, looking directly down on the pool. And it was, filled with people splashing around, like the chaise lounge chairs all organized around the pool. It was visually very kind of intriguing. And I made it my computer screensaver. And I looked at it every day for about 4 months.
Hmm.
And suddenly, like, as people say, like a true light bulb went off. And I thought, wait, why do I love looking at this photograph so much? What is it about this photograph? I feel like it's a vacation when I see it. Like, I feel like even though I'm not in a swimming pool, I feel like this wonderful connection and almost like, soothing quality of what it feels like to be on vacation. And so a girlfriend of mine reached out and asked if I was interested in going to the Art Basel convention in Miami in South Beach in December that year. And I had never been. And I thought, wow, like Miami is so famous for swimming pools. Maybe I can get access to some of the like famous hotels, like a balcony, and I can take more photographs looking down on swimming pools and so forth.
Hmm.
So when I was there, I went to every front desk and concierge and begged for them to let me on, the roof or a balcony. And of course, they all were like, "Who are you? And what like kind of hotel do you think this is? Like, that's a liability." And I was like,
Hmm.
"I'm an artist.
Right.
I'm here for Art Basel. I just want to make a piece of art from your pool." And, they just all were like, "Scram, kid, get out." And I was sitting on the bench on Collins Avenue, and I called my husband, and I was like, "Oh man, I can't, not I can't just get access to these hotels, it's just not working out." And as I was talking to him, a helicopter flew over and I couldn't hear. So I was like, "Can you hold on just a second?" And I looked up at it and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I need to get in a helicopter. Like that's how I can get the photograph." And so I had never been in a helicopter in my life. I had, no idea really what that even entailed. So I was like, I have to go by, hung up the phone, and I Googled helicopter, comma, Miami classic. And the first thing that came up, I clicked on, I saw there was a phone number, I called, and the man who answered the phone was like, "Oh, hey man, like I'm a photographer too. Like, I'm happy to fly you. Like, we'll take the door off and harness you in." And I was like, "Is that safe?" And he was like, "Yeah, yeah, like don't worry, it's gonna be great." So I was like, okay, like on a wing and a prayer, I was like, let's try this. Like, I'm here. This feels like, you know, fateful. So what the part of the story that's like really interesting, I think, for people, or I want people to know, is that the helicopter was stationed like a good 45-minute drive from South Beach. So in
Hmm.
the time that I like drove, hung up, got a car, drove there, did a debrief, took off the door, tried to like, anxiety is shooting through the roof, like, oh my gosh, I'm nervous. I've never been in a helicopter. And the 30 minutes flight time it took to get back to South Beach, I actually could not believe it, because when we arrived, there had been a storm cell that had blown off the Atlantic, and every single person who had been at a pool had like really just fled. And when I was hovering above, I looked down and it was like this gray, dismal scene. It was truly just, I mean, I have pictures of it. It was just so sad. And I I felt like I'd really gone the distance to get this image, and I was like, this is just not meant to be. And I could only afford 1 hour, and the helicopter was
Right.
expensive. And the last, the pilot was like, you have about 3 minutes left. Like, what do you want to do? Should we just head back? And I was like, totally defeated. And I lowered my camera. And in that moment of defeat, that is when I looked out the side and I saw South Beach and all of the sand. And
Mm.
I said, oh my gosh, can we spend the last 3 minutes flying along the beach? And that is where I really found like what I would call like my most famous, well-known kind of niche, which was aerial beach photography. And as I flew in those 3 minutes, I there weren't there weren't any people on the beach, but the umbrellas and the chaise lounge chairs, they all were like these geometric shapes and the beautiful, pristine sand that like were like almost like candy for me. Like I was so attracted to the stripes of the umbrellas and kind of just the composition of it all. And the sand was like my blank canvas. And so when I got back to Los Angeles, I showed the images to a friend slash mentor of mine. And she was like, wow, Gray, you should get on a plane and just continue down this on this journey. Like this is really exceptional. And I did just that. And, I basically would get on a plane and go wherever I had a friend who had a house I could stay in or was going somewhere that I could get a helicopter. And I started building a collection of these really iconic places, shooting them from doorless helicopters from above. And this was really, you have to imagine, this was pre-drone. This was
Right.
pre the world seeing anything like it. And, I had no idea that I was pretty much creating a global art design trend. Like within a year of me doing this, I mean, there were like just not only copycats, but like, the iPhone, suddenly you bought an iPhone and the screensaver it came with was an aerial photo of a beach.
Right.
And so it was just like really, I think such a great story because I was really defeated, right? And then
Right.
that's where I found something that was so special and
Yeah.
really was my next big opportunity.
Yeah. There's so much in that story that I love. I mean, first of all, the fact that you could only afford an hour, right? And the fact that you went from idea while on the phone with your husband to hanging up, Googling, calling, and on the helicopter 45 minutes or so later. I mean, the amount of action that you so quickly took. And then, like you said, the fact that in that moment of defeat, you could have just put your camera down and crossed your arms and sulked, but instead, you kept your eyes open and then you saw what became the inspiration for so much of the iconicness of your photography today.
It's like there's like a moral there. Like someone told me once, you can't in life, like you can't just knock on doors. Sometimes you need to reach down and try to open the door yourself. And that little bit of advice like stuck with me. And I think there's something about that. Like you have to sort of go the distance sometimes. And it's not easy. Most people, might give up, but sometimes you really can't open that. You can open that door if you try. And
Or in your
anyways,
case, you can throw the door off of the helicopter if you really try.
exactly.
Yeah. I really love that story. And I'm assuming the answer then is you didn't necessarily have a fear of heights, but for anyone in a helicopter without a door, it was a bit nerve-wracking.
I would say there I have flown before and it's you can't help but have a fear of heights, but when you have a camera glued to your eye and you're manually adjusting settings and you're really working through like this vision, you are so distracted, you almost forget. I almost forget that I'm in the helicopter.
Mhm.
So it's almost like scarier to be a friend of mine coming up for the ride than it is to
Right.
be
Right.
is to be me. But yes, I don't really have a true fear of heights the way some people really do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Something that I heard you say in your brand introduction video was that you pride yourself on getting people to do a double take. And you said something kind of similar earlier about you like being able to spark conversation. And I think what we're hearing is kind of how that evolution of what the Gray Malin brand is happened so organically throughout these kind of pivotal moments throughout your life. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. I mean, I don't know how to people ask me, "Great, how did you get to where you are today?" And I'm like, "I really just followed my heart." I I felt I had visions or ideas and I felt compelled to execute them. And I think what's so fun about at least my work is that there are no boundaries. And what I learned from the aerial photography was that people love destinations, and that when someone saw a destination they had been to, or maybe they aspired to go to, that felt like something they wanted to bring home and hang in their house.
Mm,
And it unlocked this idea for me that I should go to surreal destinations that people might never get to go to in their lifetime and make work that would inspire through kind of the unknown of the destination, if that makes sense. So
yeah.
my first project that I did in that regard was in Antarctica.
Mm,
And I worked on a project there placing beach balls and beach umbrellas and inflatable swans and blow ups and inner tubes in the icy tundra to sort of create that very clear dichotomy of like summer and winter coming into one as sort of like a whimsical nod to kind of obviously our climate crisis. And another one that was really sensational was I went to Bolivia. And when you say like I really I pride myself in making people do a double take. Bolivia is home to the world's largest salt flat. It's called Salar de Uyuni, and it's roughly the size of Connecticut. And it's so incredible making work there because it's like if you've ever been skiing and it's like bright white snow around you and it's really sunny, it's imagine that for as far as the eye can see. And part of that area floods. So there's like 3 inches of water. So everything you see is then reflected from the sky.
mm,
And I just love making work where people look at it and they think, is this real?
yeah.
Is this something, is this real? And I love that about photography. And it's really interesting now with AI and what's happening because I'm so grateful I have all this video footage of me working behind the scenes of my shoots. So I can be like, this this is
It's
real. And I
real.
think it's going to be an interesting kind of decade in front of us about where that all goes. And anyways, I just love going places that allow me to make work. And the Bolivia, the most famous photograph from that collection is when we placed we had a black and a white llama, and we were out on the salty, the salar. And we had just finished doing this image with all these balloons, and we draped the white balloons over the llama and then the black balloons over the other llama, and then they stood next to each other. And there's this great photograph of the the llamas with the black and white balloons that I think really like sort of, if I could pick one image or one of three images that really sort of eh, maybe evoke who I am as an artist, I would say that's one of them.
Wow. And speaking of sensational destinations, that's also a great segue into how you and I met. We were both working with the hotel brand Le Méridien at the time, you through a global brand partnership and me in-house overseeing global PR for the brand. And I had brought a group of media to shadow your photo shoot in Bhutan, which is still one of the most incredible memories I have to this day. And I first want to talk about that trip specifically and like what you're talking about with sensational destinations. What was it that made you want to shoot in Bhutan? And I remember you having really incredible inspiration behind what the images from that shoot would be.
So yes, that was this is a great segue. Working with Le Méridien at a young kind of state of my career was fascinating because they had so many properties around the world, and they said, Gray, where do you want to shoot? And I looked through the list of places, and my dad had recently gone to Bhutan,
Mm.
and he had taken some really beautiful images, specifically of the monks and of a couple of just unbelievable kind of paddy fields and temples and all of this. And he had told me that, this is public information, that, Bhutan was very closed off to tourists or tourism for a long time. And it wasn't until recently they sort of lifted that and started to allow people into the country. So
Yeah.
that was one reason why. And then the second reason is my dad had told me all about how Bhutan is the land of happiness, and
Mm.
they measure happiness there kind of like in a scale. And apparently it's where people are happiest in the entire world. And I thought, how amazing to get to go somewhere and possibly create a series that, speaks to happiness.
Mm.
And so I had, my vision was very simple. I wanted to bring balloons into Bhutan because to me, balloons, no matter your age, if you're 2 or 3 years old to, 95, balloons just bring joy to people.
Yeah.
And, we were able to get helium into the country through India, borders India.
Yeah.
It was
There was
very
no
unique,
helium in the country, so we had to have it trucked in from India to make it possible. I mean, crazy.
crazy. And I think what was so special is I remember the kids and people, the monks, like they had never seen a balloon with helium floating in the air.
Right.
And so there's a photograph of, I think it was 5 monks holding these 5 large, like those 36-inch white balloons, like these kind of tasseled strings coming down, and they're standing right next to a beautiful river kind of flowing through the green lush landscape. And it's just, truly one of those incredible, images that marries like this sensational destination with this joyful, very, very happy feeling. And, I love that someone might see that and be like, did he really go to Bhutan and
Right.
get helium into this country and create these
Yeah.
images? And I think
Or not even
that
realize that how much of a challenge it was to get helium into the country. And you're making me remember too that the monks were not like hired as models or anything. That all happened by happenstance because I had taken the group of media to a local monastery. We were taking a tour. We had met a handful of young monks and we were chatting to them. And shout out to Pavia Rosati, who co founded Fathom. She had said to them, "What are you guys doing today?" And they said, "Oh, we're off today. We don't have, school," or however they referred to it. And she had said, "Do you want to come to the photo shoot with us?" And so we arrived and you guys were shooting over the river or creek or something. And we got out of the car with like 3 or 4 monks. And you, of course, with your creative eye, you were like, "Hey guys, you want to be in a photo?" And then look at the gorgeous imagery that came out of that.
where I did not even realize that. I love
Yeah.
Pavia. That's so amazing.
So long ago now, too.
I do feel like that is also part of the magic, is like you just have to kind of, things unfold sometimes just like by being there. And, those llamas in Bolivia, it was kind of a fluke what happened. And that shot with the monks, obviously you all brought them. We weren't planning on that. And I think it's part of the fun
Yeah.
is allowing it to unfold while it's
Yeah.
happening.
And almost the through line of everything you've said with your career is you've really followed those kind of creative pings along the way to let it unfold. And I mean, I still have a photograph from that trip and a photograph you took at Le Meridien Raw hanging in my home to this day. And in addition to working with Le Meridien, you've partnered with other hotels like Parker Palm Springs and one of the most adorable, gorgeous shoots ever, Four Seasons Hawaii. And I know you've talked a lot already about why travel is such a focus for you, but what is it maybe about those hotel partnerships that you think helps bring that to light?
Well, I know exactly what it is. I think just like a destination, someone has been or wants to go, they have an attachment. It's the same with hotels. When I did my first shoot at the Parker Palm Springs, you know, the I aspired to go there. I couldn't afford to really go there. It was expensive and I was young, but I loved how whimsical and design forward it was. And when the opportunity came for me to work on a photo shoot there, anyone who had stayed there, ever been there, or hoped to go there were instantly interested in these photographs because ultimately you're now able to possibly bring home a piece of that hotel,
Yeah.
a memory maybe of your wedding, your girls trip, your anniversary trip, whatever the moment was that you were there, into
Yeah.
your house in an artistic way to kind of remind you of that special place. So I think that destinations and hotels really, like, you can kind of see how that naturally progressed to that point for me.
Yeah.
And another thing that I will say was interesting was after the aerial beach photography sort of like copycats, I was like, great, like how do you protect yourself? Like how can
Mm.
I can't copyright aerial beach photography, but
Right.
by getting permission to shoot at hotels, I was able to, you know, do what other photographers couldn't come and copy. And
Right.
that it's like a really big sort of success for me. But,
Mm.
at the time it was really just sort of a natural idea. And luckily that's sort of what happened there. And the Four Seasons Hawaii was amazing to work with. They're, a huge brand. And I think we've worked with so many incredible hotels, from the Plaza Hotel in New York City to the Breakers in Palm Beach, the Colony in
Mm.
Palm Beach, the Little Nell in Aspen, the Claridge's in London recently, and Plaza
Wow.
Athénée in Paris. So it's been just an amazing kind of continued journey to partner and create images at iconic hotels around the world.
Yeah. And in addition to partnerships with hotels, to me, you're really the king of brand extensions. And I feel like you have this unique ability to know your brand so well and really find like minded brands that make sense for you to create authentic partnerships with. Some examples for the listeners: you have a line of super chic rugs with Ruggable, adorable children's clothing with Janie and Jack, creative invitations with Paperless Post, and even, I think it's safe to say, the coolest pack of Uno cards that has ever existed. And that's just naming a few. So, how do you approach brand partnerships and what do you think makes a good one? In the heart of Soho, New York City's arts and culture hub, lies your luxurious escape, the Dominic Hotel. Experience unparalleled amenities, including king size beds, spacious rooms, a fully equipped fitness center, a seasonal rooftop pool, and the renowned Sisley Spa. Savor Hawaiian inspired bites and cocktails at Terrace on 7 or innovative dishes at the Michelin starred Vestry. Book today using special code SUCCESS, that's SUCCESS, for 20% off your next stay of 2 nights or more in a suite through the end of the year. Visit thedominichotel.com to book. The Dominic, where every moment is an indulgence.
I mean, I will say it has been, I could just, I could do an entire podcast about what it's been like to work on the the brand partnerships over the last 15 years. I think
Yeah.
there when when I think about my brand, like our trademark is make every day a getaway.
Mhm.
So it naturally becomes this it really it's really easy to take a phrase like make every day a getaway and kind of apply it to whether it's fashion or hospitality or it's even beverage or F&B or travel accessories, etc. Like taking the idea. But to answer your question, the honest truth is it really all comes from the heart. I think one of my earlier collaborations that was really successful was with Away Luggage, and
Mm.
they reached out. They were brand new, and they were like, we're a new company, and I was like, let's chat in like a year and see how things are going. And I'll never forget seeing the photographs printed inside the luggage. They went for
Mhm.
sale. They sold out within hours, and I remember just thinking like it was just such a popular successful, authentic partnership to give someone a gray Malin luggage, or
Right.
collaborate and create luggage. And even to like Uno, which just came out and, recently, when Mattel reached out, I was organically playing Uno with my children who, are learning numbers and colors and everything. And we really love Uno. And I thought, oh my gosh, like how fun would it be to have my photography on these different cards? And, I think sort of there's this organic part of it. And then there's also this very, like what you said, knowing your customer. Like when we did our first partnership with Veuve Clicquot, I remember being like, I don't actually, there's no fee you need to pay me for this. I just want to make photography that sort of I think our audience will love. And I just truly knew in my heart that they would respond well, sort of like what Andy Warhol did with the Campbell's soup can. I was like, I wonder if I can do that with the Veuve Clicquot bottle, champagne
Mm-hmm.
bottle. And I mean, Janie and Jack Kids line, I mean, that was amazing. We illustrated the dogs I've been shooting around the world into watercolors and then created like chic tennis outfits and summer travel sets and, dresses and swimwear and everything kind of the photography has transcended from really not just being for adults, but also kids. And I have two
Yeah.
kids books. So it's just been this really organic journey. And whether like the company reaches out to me or we reach out to them, I always ask myself, like, do I think our, our customer would want this? Like, is this
Yeah.
worth the energy to bring to life? And we're a novel brand. There's no brand before mine where photography is like a lifestyle brand that you're kind of pushing down these walls to create something. It's not like I can say like, let's use so and so as an example of this. It's like we're constantly trying to, we're the first kind of its kind. Even with Ruggable, Ruggable was so interesting to work on with rugs. How do you create something, you know, for the floor? And I was like, the floor is sort of like a canvas of a room, it's a blank
Mm-hmm.
canvas. So anyways, it's been amazing. It's actually really the way it's grown, helped grow our brand has been phenomenal. But for me as just a creative person, it's been so exciting to work on so many brand extensions over the last 15 years.
Yeah, I feel like when you announce a collaboration, I always feel like it's unexpected, but it totally makes sense. So that like level of authenticity completely comes through. And speaking of make every day a getaway, the Gray Malin Getaway House in Montecito, California is, I think, one of the most incredible examples of a brand extension. Tell us a bit about how this property or the idea for this property came to be.
Well, thanks. This is by far the most exciting just dream for me that I've ever been able to kind of everything is a dream, but this was a true kind of just dream come true. And it really started during the pandemic. I opened in partnership with Aspen a beach club on the top of Ajax Mountain. That was like kind of this artistic vision of an aerial beach photo of mine. And also I've done aerial ski photography and seeing the success of it, I was like, wow, people really like are loving this experience where they're walking into a gray Malin photograph and they're creating their own memories and taking their own photographs and sharing them. And then we repeated the idea in Nantucket with like a sort of different, more nautical experience. And then I like had a little light bulb go off and I thought, what if, instead of working with someone else, what if we could fully own this? What if
Hmm.
it was something that, was our own real destination or place or experience that the company or the brand owned? And believe it or not, in 2020, I rented this one house in Montecito by the beach, kind of last minute with my kids. And we stayed there, left. Remember, we had great, great, great time together. The house was tired. It needed a revamp, but the location was great.
Mm.
And last summer, when I was thinking about all this sort of like experience talk of like, can we make a real experience? I had a photo shoot in Montecito at the property of the San Ysidro Ranch. And I was like laying in bed one night, like normal person, and went on social media, got bored, and I opened Zillow, and it said listed like 6 hours ago. This property new, and I clicked it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is that house we rented,
No.
3.5 years ago. And so I looked through the pictures and I just instantly was like, this is it. This is the property. Like this location is unparalleled. There are very few houses on the Pacific side of the highway of the PCH in Montecito. And I sent it straight through and I said, I think we should think about purchasing this house. And I don't know if anyone listening has ever been to Montecito, but it truly is a magical enclave, only 90 minutes from LA. And
Mm.
it, to me, it's the mountains really hug the ocean there. And there's a very sort of small amount of land. So it's kind of like, it's not exactly like a Nantucket or an Aspen, but it's similar in the sense that there's not a lot of room to grow. It's not like, it's small and it's unique and it's absolutely beautiful. And so we bought the home and we, talked to the management company because it was a home owned by someone who rented it.
Mm.
And we kind of spent 3 months waiting for the bookings to all finish. And we lined up, a local interior designer, a local builder, a local landscape architect. And we were like, listen, this house is not just a normal house. This is like an extension of my brand.
Yeah.
And every room I want to feel kind of like a different theme of my photography. And so when you walk in the door, like you're transported to St. Bart's, and then you're in Italy, and then you're in the room with all the dog prints, and then upstairs you're in Palm Beach, and one room's like you're in Santa Barbara. So it was just so fun. And we really took something, a 1960s house, and turned it into just a true, like, I'm so proud of it because when you walk in, my best friends have all gone and stayed there, and they all say like, great, this surpasses our expectation level. Like we had no idea how big it was or how close it was to the beach or how beautiful the the decor was. And we were able to partner with like-minded brands such as like Wheezy Towels and Biscuit Bedding. These are brands that maybe not a lot of people know, but I love these bedding and towel brands. And then we worked with Williams Sonoma Home, who basically furnished almost the entire home with their product to almost, I'd say, bring like a hotel feel to the house,
Mm.
because most rental homes, people know it's a rental, so they're not going to invest a lot of money in the furniture. And that really unlocked this superior quality of hospitality. Not to mention, Williams Sonoma did the kitchen, so you have all of their like top grade appliances, dreamy place to cook or host. And so, you go and you get to see the Gray Malin art. There's the ruggable rugs, the Williams Sonoma. We partnered with one of our beverage partners, Don Julio, to do like the bar. And we customized sort of as many wonderful moments as you could imagine that felt on brand as we could, down to, the map when you walk in the door of kind of all of Gray's favorite spots to go in Montecito, and Blue Jay e-bikes in the garage for you to take and go around the town and take your map with you. So it's just been a dream come true in the sense that there's now like an actual destination you can go and live the Gray Malin brand
Yeah.
and create your own photographs and your own memories based upon my photography.
Yeah, I love everything you're saying about the branded moments too, because obviously your photography was going to feature prominently throughout the home. But I loved the other creative ways that you've worked it in on surfboards and on wallpaper, branded towels, all the other things that you've mentioned already too. And just from that Zillow story, it just sounds so meant to be. Like it was listed 6 hours ago and you had stayed there already and you were just starting to think about how it could be experiential. I mean, talk about the literal puzzle pieces coming together. And I guess with your mom being an interior designer and your father in real estate, it was this kind of confluence of factors to make the perfect thing come together, right?
Exactly. It's it's just like in my heart already there.
Yeah. And I see that the property is currently managed by Vacation Rentals of Santa Barbara. Was that the management company from before? And what's your experience been like working with the management company?
That was the company from before, and they managed it for, I think, 10 years prior to us
Wow.
buying it, and, I don't have the bandwidth to be the point person for this house, and in our company, there certainly are people who help, but it's really nice they have sort of mastered the turnkey approach of,
Yeah.
it's not the company Goop did all the beauty products and all the bathrooms, and like they have really every time a guest checks in, they know exactly how each room should look, like every little detail from like the bathrobes hanging on the right hooks, and knowing that there's someone there who really cares about the details the way that I care is
Yeah.
so important to me, and they have a pulse on Santa Barbara that we
Yeah.
don't. So it's been a good experience working with them.
Yeah. Do you have plans for more getaway houses?
People have asked really, truly this question a lot, and I would love to do more personally. I think that it would be amazing to continue and do a mountain one and maybe, an East Coast based one. So we'll see with time and so forth.
Okay.
Time and energy.
And I know you've mentioned that your friends have used the space. Do you and your family get to use it as well?
Yes, we do. We try to use it once a month, and it's really just it's all Montecito feels like an extended suburb of LA. It's, 90 minutes. Sometimes it takes me 90 minutes to get from my house to downtown LA. So
Yeah. And being
it's
a dad to two twins, two young ones, has traveling with little ones changed the way you travel or not so much?
it has, I think now we're a two-bedroom kind of travel family.
Yeah.
And within that, it really changes sort of certain hotels just don't really work for families and some really do. And
Yeah.
of course, having a house or renting a home versus staying in a hotel really changes things. We joined a company called Exclusive Resorts, which basically caters to families because they're mostly like 3 or 4 bedrooms in their properties, and that's been really helpful. So the answer is yes, travel has changed for us. Like we're going to London in February with our kids, which is our first time to Europe with them, and I I want to stay at so and so property because it's where I love to go, but in reality there's another property that's really more conducive for families and kids, and having 2 rooms or a bunk room for them and a king bedroom for you, and so it
Yeah.
really does change.
Yeah, absolutely. And final question for you before I move into the last three questions that I ask everyone. You recently launched a new book of photography that we mentioned at the start, Dogs. Not only are the photos gorgeous, but they're also adorable, of course. And I was really touched by the fact that you dedicated the book to your dog, your late dog of 15 years, Stella. Tell us more about the project and the inspiration behind that. And mostly, like, how did you get these gorgeous dogs to sit still?
So just bringing this all home, I think if you could imagine back when I was doing the Sunday flea market, I had Stella, our little rescue kind of black lab mutt, in the flea market with me. She would kind of curl up in her bed while I would talk to people. And I never really thought of her as a subject matter, but while I was shooting projects specifically, there was one in Palm Beach where I was photographing the front entrance of the Breakers, and the wardrobe stylist, there were like 10 models all dressed in like 1960s attire. the wardrobe stylist had left one prop at home and her husband brought it to set and he had their golden retriever with him. And I said, "Oh my gosh, can can we take a photograph with your dog in the photo?" And he was like, "Of course." And we ended up getting a solo shot of this golden retriever, you know, with this vintage car and the breakers. And it really sort of, there was something there that people, they didn't really want to buy a photograph with people in it, but they liked seeing a dog in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went on to do a vintage project in Aspen, similar thing, but we brought in a Bernese mountain dog with a bunch of vintage skis kind of stuck in the snow with a beautiful mountainscape behind. And sure enough, when we released the project, that image just really hit home for people. So I was sitting there one day with Stella and I'm looking at her and I'm just like, what is it about dogs that people, relate to? And I was like, well, I love my dog endlessly. Like she's, my family.
Yeah.
So I reached out to the Beverly Hills Hotel who I had worked on a project with and I said, would you allow me to return? But in this situation, can I photograph different dog breeds living at the hotel? And they were like, we love it. We love dogs. We're pet friendly.
Right.
So that was the birth of the dogs. And that series came out September of 2020. I shot it February 2020, right before shutdown. And when it released, it was really a difficult time to put out travel photography. And somehow, like the magic of people seeing dogs on vacation versus people
Right.
really struck a chord. And the internet just grabbed a hold of it and it became like an overnight success. And so that's how the dogs project started. And then over the last 4 years, I just hustled, all around and we shot the dogs in Paris and London and New York City and Nantucket, San Diego, all kind of across the country. And then sadly, right when I had said the book completed into, it went to press, Stella passed away, but I dedicated the book to her and kind of, I think when you look through the book, by the way, it's such a likable book. I think everybody will love this book.
Yeah.
It's really the pages inside that they become very meaningful no matter, what, if you have a dog or you had a dog in the past or, it's instantly that wonderful connection we have to our pets that make the pages in the book so meaningful.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy I was able to honor Stella after 15 beautiful years together.
Yeah. It's a
Who would have
beautiful
thought?
legacy to leave behind.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Miss her.
Well, I will go into the last three questions before I start crying about my dog. But I wanted to ask you, what was the best hospitality experience you've ever had?
So there's a property in South Africa that I have been to. I've traveled the world to go back there because I had such a great experience.
Wow, that's saying
And
something.
yeah, so on my on my honeymoon, we went to South Africa and we stayed in Cape Town and then we went out to the wine country, which is about 45 minutes outside. There's a town, two towns next door to one another. One's called Franschhoek and one's called Stellenbosch.
Mhm.
And there's a property there called La Residence. And it's done by a designer named Liz Biden. And it just is the most magical property. And it's decorated in kind of a lot of sort of every room is completely different. So unless you go and you stay in the so-and-so suite or the so-and-so suite, you have no idea what's going on inside the rooms. And the property, the hospitality, the people who work there, the food and beverage, the wine country. I always thought Napa was so stunning, but once you go to this area and you have these kind of like really ancient steep mountains, these obviously elephants used to roam that are now vineyards. It's just breathtaking. But the property, I've really traveled around the world to go back to time and time again. And I was just there for my fourth time last February, this past February.
Wow.
Yes, La Residence is amazing.
I went to a Stellenbosch and Franschhoek as well forever ago, and I'm dying to go back because you're right. I think there's a lot of beautiful places in the world, but that's definitely in the top.
Yeah, the whole South Africa trip, like a couple days in the city, a couple days in the wine country, and a couple days on safari. It's just such a
Yeah.
great, healthy, like 2-week trip. You get a taste of everything.
Yeah. So on the
Highly recommend
complete
it.
opposite side of the fabulousness of that, what was the worst hospitality experience you've ever had?
So I had to think about this one, but there was a time I was on a trip in Thailand, and it was really just unfortunate. But basically, we checked into our room, and I unpacked a little bit, changed into my bathing suit, and I went to go, and we had like our own swimming pool. Kind of, it was just wonderful in terms of like the size of the room and our own pool. And as I was getting into the pool, I looked down and I was like, oh, there's a leaf down there. And it actually was a dead rat.
Oh,
And it really just freaked me out in such a way that it was hard to come back from it. Like
yeah.
we changed rooms. The hotel was like, we're so sorry, but I don't know how to describe it. It just really was the worst.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hard to come back from. That's an intense service recovery for them at that moment.
Yeah, like not good.
No. And final question for you. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there anyone, maybe a person or a brand that you think has truly mastered it?
Hospitality means feeling like you're home, feeling like you're visiting somewhere, and you're made to feel like a family member, or you're made to feel very, very welcome.
Mhm.
And I think there's a hotel group that I think has really mastered it, and it's called Firmdale Hotels. They're London based, and they're owned by a husband and wife. And the husband does the real estate, the wife does the interiors, and her name is Kit Kemp. She has her own incredible following. But I feel like all of the Firmdale properties really have mastered what hospitality means to me. Like when I check into a property there, I feel at home. I love the way the rooms are decorated. I love the level of service. They all have an honor bar room, which is like a beautiful living room with like a full bar, just like something you might have in your house. And you just make your own drink or take your own kind of snacks and sit down, or invite friends to come join you, and you just sign it to your room, and it feels like an extension of your house, but somewhere far away.
Yeah.
And I really think they've done an incredible job. They have 2 properties in New York City, actually 3. They just opened a third. So if you haven't heard of them, I really strongly feel like they're worth checking out. And Firmdale Hotels.
I couldn't agree more. I love what they do. And
And their
Gray, honestly, just
restaurants.
want to thank you for your time today, for sharing your inspiration, for sharing your journey. It's been such a pleasure to have you on.
I'm so glad. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone, it's time for today's sweet summary where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. I knew Gray was going to be a great guest, but even still, I'm blown away by the level of creativity, authenticity, and insight he shared. And particularly that second word, authenticity. It just feels so accurate for Gray. In looking back, it seems clear how every step of his career was born from a place of him following his passions, his interests, and his curiosity. For example, that image he took from a balcony of a pool, he had that set as a screensaver for weeks before he was able to identify what it was that made it so compelling to look at. In the light bulb moment, he said, I feel like it's a vacation when I see it. That insight led him to join a friend in Miami for Art Basel, where he went around to all the best hotels asking to photograph their pools. The irony of Gray being rejected from these properties who would surely fall all over themselves to be shot by him today is a great reminder for those of us who might be currently experiencing our own no's. Anyway, even though he was turned down, lucky for all of us, Gray had a friend who reminded him sometimes you can't just knock on doors, you have to open them for yourself. And open them he did, going from being on the phone with his husband, explaining how all the proverbial doors had been shut on him, to boarding a helicopter for his first ever aerial shoot in less than an hour. What a great lesson in taking action. If you have an idea that excites you, find a way to make it happen. Don't let anything or anyone stand in your way. For Gray, it also seems like everything comes back to customer insights. While talking to people at his flea market booth, he learned how many of them felt uncomfortable buying art, how galleries were stuffy and intimidating. He wanted to make the process inclusive and joyful, and launched his direct to consumer website so that people had the luxury of browsing fine art in their PJs. And not only is he attuned to his customers' insights, he's also able to distill down to the why. When the Prada Marfer series launched his career, he knew it was because people wanted fantasy. When he saw how well his destination and hotel photography were performing, he knew it was because of the attachment people had to certain places. And when no one could travel in 2020, he knew his images of chic pups at the Beverly Hills Hotel were selling because of the whimsy and the joy of the dogs themselves. Overall, Gray's story is filled with moments of serendipity. How the helicopter arrived at the exact moment that he told his husband there was no way to shoot the pools from above. That a storm rolled in at the perfect time to make said pools less attractive to photograph, but cleared the beaches, resulting in his iconic approach to shooting destinations and, casually, the creation of an entirely new category, photography. And the fact that, bored one evening, he was mindlessly scrolling Zillow only to find the house that he and his family had just stayed at mere hours after it was listed. Maybe if we all follow Gray's lead, staying curious and embracing the paths we didn't plan for, we all might invite a little more kismet into our own lives too.